So we've seen how we use keyword parameters in functions that already have them. How do we create them ourselves? Well, here's a modification to our currency amount function that does that. When line 2 is run, the computer again defines a function called currency amount with two parameters, amount and currency. Notice that I've changed the order of amount and currency. The reason is because I'm going to make currency into a keyword parameter, and keyword parameters have to come after any required parameters. Here, amount is a required parameter, so it has to come first. I convert currency into a keyword parameter by giving it an initial value. I say currency equals USD. What this says is if there is no argument corresponding to currency, then assume the currency is US dollars, or assume the currency string is USD. However, an argument could be passed in that overwrites this assumed value. As before, when running, the computer initially skips the rest of the function body because the function hasn't been called yet, and then it runs line 13. Line 13 said to print the output of currency amount with only one argument, 5. Remember, this is the line of code that gave us an error previously when we had two required parameters in our currency amount function. However, now, one of our parameters is optional. So what does this do? Well, it takes the number 5 and puts it in as the value for amount. There is no second argument, so it lets currency remain as USD. Notice that this actually kind of fits our previous analogy about arguments and parameters being kind of like using some assignment statements at the beginning of each function call. We would begin this function by calling amount equals 5. We don't actually call that, but it's as if the computer did, and that's how it loads the value 5 into the variable amount. Then we want to call currency equals something, and because nothing is supplied for currency, we assume it equals whatever is given up here. It stays as US dollars. If something else was given, we would use that other value instead of USD. This also helps explain why our function can't run if it doesn't have all the arguments that are required. It's going to call amount equals something either way, so if we don't supply that something, then the computer doesn't know what value to give to the variable amount. So this function call has now bumped execution of our program up inside that function. It checks to see if currency is JPY, which it isn't. Then it checks to see if currency is USD, which it is. That causes it to run line 6 and return a string comprised of a $sign and whatever number was passed in as our amount, in this case 5. That then comes back out and takes the place of our function call in our original code. And so this becomes print $5, the string, not an actual $5 bill. And sure enough, that's the output we see first. What about for our second function call though? On line 15, we again print the output of the function currency amount with the argument 5, but this time we do take advantage of that keyword parameter. We tell it the currency should equal GBP. GBP then takes the place of USD in our function call. It overwrites that default or that assumed value. And so now, for this call to the function, the value of currency is GBP instead of USD. This function call sends execution of the program into that function. It checks to see if currency is JPY. It isn't. Checks if it's USD. It isn't. Checks if it's GBP, and sure enough, it is. And so it returns the symbol for pound and the number 5. That comes back and replaces our function call in the first place. And so the string for 5 pounds gets printed. So if we call currency amount and don't specify a currency, it assumes dollars. If we call currency amount and do specify a currency, it uses the currency that we specify. Either way though, we had to supply an amount. Amount is a required or a positional parameter. That means it's required. Only the parameters that are given equal signs and initial values are considered optional or keyword parameters. They're sometimes called optional because we don't have to set their values to call that function. And they're sometimes called keyword parameters because we have to use their names or their keywords to set their values.